Hello, everyone. Welcome to Buckeye Leadership Fellows Beneath the Surface. My name is Mercedes Wallace. Many of you know me. I'm the director of Buckeye Leadership Fellows and your host for the night. Beneath the Surface has had a lot of iterations of what this would look like, and many of you have probably heard me talk about this ad nauseum since I started this job, but it's always been founded in the same three principles. It's always been founded in communication and unabashed vulnerability, and mostly curiosity. I'm always looking for ways that we can better connect with people beneath surface level, hence the very straightforward name. And one of my favorite things is conversations that happen typically late at night with small groups of people that are intimate around kitchen tables, at least in my experience, or bonfires, or in a car with a perfectly curated playlist. And so I really wanted this to feel like that in some ways, like almost like you're eavesdropping in on a coffee conversation. And so Beneath the Surface was born. One of my favorite things about the way that we structured, and as Mike and I talked about how these series would go, is we really wanted it to be different than a lot of the other interview styles. And the way that we came up with doing that is that it's built for you, by you. So we could have just came up with a bunch of questions that I was really curious about to talk to our guests, but that didn't feel like it would resonate with the community around us. So instead we turned to you, and over the past 3 weeks, 70 some questions have been submitted that built the conversation that we would have today. So the hope is that you feel a little bit of all of you in this conversation, and that you, for many of you, meet somebody for the first time, and if you had already been familiar with his work, maybe you see him in a way that's a little bit different. I'm going to read off of the card on this one because I'm going to mess it up if I don't. Which is why I am so honored to welcome our first guest, who has many awards and things named that I need to read them off of a card.
No, you don't need to read those.
I'm going to do the whole thing. We're going to work through it. He is New York Times bestselling, Obama's book list noted, named Book of the Year, graduate of Beechcroft High School, proud Columbus native, neighborhood sneakerhead, cultural critic, changemaker and advocate, about to be six-time author, MacArthur Genius Award winner. His essays and music criticism have landed him in places like The Fader, Pitchfork, New Yorker, to name a few. Did I miss anything? Please join me in welcoming Hanif Abdurraqib.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for having me.
Hanif, welcome to Beneath the Surface.
Yeah, this is cool.
I hope so. Are you ready to get started?
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. How's your heart today?
It's good. It's earlier I was like doing an interview. My book comes out in March, so I have to do some interviews. I'm doing one for Columbus Monthly, which is cool because it was like a local thing, and I was sitting with the interviewer, and they asked me a similar question about how my heart was doing. I thought, well, probably is the same as most other people, slightly worse some hours and slightly better in fewer hours than I'd like, but breaking even.
I'll take breaking even.
Yeah.
What is something that you've surprised yourself with lately?
You mean like a physical object or just an emotional or surprise?
Let's go emotional surprise.
Well, I think that I'm always surprised in kind of I think building up a capacity for gratitude in the midst of I don't think, gosh, I think a thing that concerns me greatly is that we are culturally and societally so attuned towards cruelty as a response to everything. And the thing about the acceleration of cruelty is that it does not leave much of a runway for gratitude. And another thing about cruelty is that the way that to enact cruelty on another is to pour more cruelty into the world interpersonally, is to make it so that an entire ecosystem of people turn towards cruelty as a mode of protection. And in spite of that, I think to find really gratitude in minutia for me, to find a record at a record store, or to kind of locate an old photo of myself when hanging out with my brother, these kind of things. I think I surprise myself in how easily I still turn towards gratitude, despite everything in me kind of seeking a type of cynicism.
I want to dig in a little bit deeper on some of the things that you were just noting on, specifically around cultural cruelty and that notion. quite a few of the questions that were submitted sit around a social justice space. So if you're okay with us starting there,
Yeah, for
where
sure.
I'd like to go. So this comes from one of our BLF fellows, and they asked, as a change is beginning to seem more and more impossible, what recommendations do you have for a young person who wants to make a difference but can't figure out where to start?
Join a political organization, a local one. When I was young, when I was in college, when I was a young college student, I'm dating myself, but it's when the Iraq War was. And I did not know what it was then to protest the war. But there were people, elders around me who did know. And there were political organizations that I could join where I could learn. And not only that, and not just on large scale things. An organization that I'm a part of that is really important to me is Eat Letters to Incarcerated Muslims. And all we do every year is we do a webinar wherein we show people how to write letters to incarcerated folks on Eid, on after the celebration after Ramadan. I know that, and it's work. Don't get me wrong. When I'm saying that's it, I don't mean like it's nothing. But I'm saying that that's kind of the framework of the organization, right? We do political ed, but mostly it's how do you write letters to incarcerated people and send them out? That's the whole gig. And yeah, we organize throughout the year to make it happen and all this stuff. But what I'm saying is, if you are organizing with other people, you are one, not alone, and two, you are amidst people who are telling you you are not experiencing the world alone. And so the things that you are witnessing and that you are understanding about the world, and this isn't to say that you are going to agree with everyone you are in political organization. I mean, like, that's just not the math. And quite frankly, it shouldn't be probably. But it is good to, even in those moments of tension and disagreement, to say that we're coming at this from a place where we are all kind of fighting towards a common goal. And what can we sacrifice and offer to each other in the pursuit of that common goal, which is another way, I think, to strip away this kind of process of cruelty or punishment or enacting these really intense moments of rage upon people who we are in conflict with. And so I say join a political organization, and Columbus has so many of them that you can tap into, like really so many of them. And so many of them too are not campus-based. I know OSU has many too, but there's a lot that they're not campus-based, right? Like to be able to say, I'm going to tap in with, say, Just 614, and I'm going to do these meal serves with them once a week. And that's it, to say I'm going to show up and do these meal serves for communities on the West Side. That is engaging with not only a political action, but it's also helping you, the individual, understand the city you are in more. And that helps you love the city you are in more, because it's easy to become, especially for you all who are, I mean, lovingly I say this, but like for y'all who are on campus and the world, like I talked to some OSU students where the world seems like it begins at the short north and ends at like Hudson, you know? And that's cool. I get it. And I also understand how that happens, just like logistically. But the city is asking more of you than to be witness to just that block of things. And it's asking more of you than to just like consume what it has to offer. It's also asking you to return something to it.
I love that. I like the idea of returning something to it. And I know many in the fellows program, at least, but broader on campus, that it is easy to get sucked into just what's happening on campus when there's a world around you. So
yeah,
I love that. Another BLF fellow asked, how do you approach the idea of patriotism as a Black man in the United States?
I just don't. I don't think about patriotism at all. I don't, it doesn't, there's nothing that I would gain from an investment in patriotism. And I also don't, it doesn't require, there's nothing that I could do to meet any broad requirement of patriotism. To be clear, I'm not just a Black man, I'm a Black man who was raised Muslim in the United States. So, and Black men who were raised Muslim in the United States in my formative years were post 9/11 years. And so my relationship with patriotism is a little bit different, which doesn't mean that I'm like trying to burn down the White House, but it's more of a level of indifference. I'm indifferent about the idea of patriotism because I don't think it would serve my work. But if you do want to, I mean, I've written, not to like self-cite, but I think the best thing I do here is cite myself. In the book, They Can't Kill Us Till They Kill Us, which is my second book, I write pretty extensively about Marvin Gaye's singing of the national anthem at the 1988 All-Star game. And that is maybe the closest I get to examining patriotism and race in a way that's substantial, because it is talking about Marvin Gaye's deconstructing of the national anthem and singing it in a different way than it had been sung. And that approach is to recontextualize his relationship with patriotism, is to take this song and put like a R&B drum track behind it and sing it in a different way than it's ever been approached before. And so he is more invested in perhaps the reformatting of the American dream than I am. I'm not that interested in the reformatting of the American dream. I don't really, what I am most, if this is a patriotic pursuit, I would say I'm interested in kind of reverse engineering the history that I've been told and inserting people into that history who would not have space there before. For example, in my last book of essays, A Little Devil in America, there was this piece about Ellen Armstrong, who was the first Black woman magician to have her own solo show. And when I was working on this piece, I was fascinated by her, obsessed with her. I had to call countless literal magic historians, which that's a real job. There are actual magic historians. And there aren't many of them. And I know this because I would call them and be passed to the other one, all to find out little bits of information on this Black woman who did something that, in my mind, is massively heroic, singularly heroic. She was performing in barns for people who were recently freed, enslaved folks who were recently freed. And she was chased out of towns and her home was burned down. And there's nowhere in the history books that honors her. That is a failure of what some would consider patriotism, because it is not telling a full American story. And so if there is any investment I have in quote unquote patriotism, it is perhaps reverse engineering the history that we've been told and inserting people into that history that I think tell a fuller picture of America.
I don't have an eloquent follow-up to that, but I do need to note that I love magic in all forms. And if I have the option to be near a magic show, I'm going.
I also love magic. I really love magic. And the reason, sadly, the reason I got into Ellen Armstrong was because I was watching that magic movie.
Now you see it.
Yeah. I was like, Now You See Me. And I was like, you know, surely there was a Black woman who was doing magic before anyone else. And there was.
Last one in the social justice sector, although I'm sure we'll continue to touch on this, but another fellow asked, how do you grapple with the truth that change only lasts a season? Joy, peace, and healing are often painted as commodities that many Black people cannot afford. How do you come to understand this concept within Black dynamics, and how do you reject it in your own way?
Well, I just don't think joy is enough, which I think maybe feeds into my own, what some would consider cynical approach, perhaps. But I just don't think joy is enough, particularly if we hoard it, if we are interested in joy only as something that we collect for ourselves. I say we broadly, but I'm speaking specifically about Black folks. There was I grew up I'm from the east side of Columbus in a neighborhood that was pretty neglected. I grew up in a neighborhood that at the time was called Uzi Alley, out the Greenbrier projects and all this. And it was important for me to know, as it's important for me to note now, that the residents of that neighborhood didn't give it that name. And the people who love people in that neighborhood didn't give it that name. And so what happens is a city, a place, be it governmental or police or whatever, they determine what a war zone is. And so then they determine where a war takes place. And the people who are living in that zone are treated as such. And so, but outside of that, that was a joyful place to grow up, because we were so close to, I could hear the music of my neighbors. I could hear my friends' moms singing in the kitchen because our walls were so thin. And there's a way that I reformatted this approach to what some would consider like immense poverty, and really refocused it on this idea around community, and how community could really echo joy that would last. And we could not only echo it into each other's lives, but repurpose it and give it to another person. And now I worry that the seeking of joy is rooted around this idea that it's only ours and no one else's, and no one else can have access to it. And we have to hoard our joy to get to the next moment that we're of fighting for something. It just doesn't feel useful to me. Every week, every other week now that I'm home, I travel a lot. But any week I'm home, every 2 weeks, I buy flowers for myself and put them in the house for no reason. I mean, it's just a thing that I started doing in 2018, and I live alone. I've lived alone for a pretty long time now at this point. Well, I live with my dog, Wendy, but I don't live with another sentient being who can have a conversation with me. Um, and I like the idea of adding beauty to my house, that even if it's impermanent, right? The pursuit of that, and I go to the same florist and have all the time, and I put the bouquets together myself, and all that. And even engaging in that, I am aware that this pleasure that I am presenting myself is on a clock, because flowers, the minute you remove them from their natural habitat, are on a clock. This doesn't mean that I'm dreading the flowers dying the minute I take them home. It is instead meaning that I have a finite amount of time with this pleasure that I've given myself. And through that, I get to perhaps use it as a bridge to invite pleasure into someone else's life. It has to be an ecosystem of joy. And I think the politicizing of joy as this ephemeral abstraction means that people are just like, I'm seeking joy by mindlessly watching 10 seasons of Friends or whatever, which is cool. I'm not, I mean, like literally on my couch this week, I didn't watch Friends, but I watched like a full season of a show and was fine with it. But I was not tricking myself into thinking that that was a political action. I was just doing that as it's cotton candy, it dissolves and it's gone. And then what's next? And so I think the problem with the commodification and politicization of joy is that people have begun to think that every action that one takes is political, even if that action is nothing, even if the action is just like a selfish thing that you may very well be entitled to, for sure. But like, let's be honest about what it is. Like when I was on my couch watching like season 3 of Gilmore Girls, I wasn't like, this is revolution. I was like, I'm trying to see Gilmore Girls. It's been a minute. I would like to run it back.
This was not your first experience with Gilmore Girls?
No,
Okay. How many times? Like, is this an annual thing? There's some
no.
people that do this
There are,
usually.
yeah, I can't do it annually. There's just too much of it to do annually for my
Okay.
schedule. So every 2 years, at this point now, I kind of pick out the seasons I like. So it's often like 1, 3, and there's one other, but 1 and 3 are the ones I refer
Enough
to.
for you to have favorite seasons.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. Good
For
for
sure.
you. You mentioned the neighborhood you grew up in was musical.
Yeah.
So you shouldn't be surprised to find as a musical critic, we have quite a few questions around music. A BLF fellow asked, your piece, A Tribe Called Quest Broke Up, is a beautifully emotional tribute to the East Coast hip hop group. My question is, are there any songs of theirs that are especially special or personal to you?
Yeah. My favorite Tribe Called Quest song is a song called Busta's Lament, which is a song off of probably their worst album. It's a song off the Love Movement, which was their final album before they returned to release the album in 2016, after the day after the election, which was such a wild experience, man. Like, I remember I was in Philadelphia, and everyone knew the Tribe Called Quest album was coming out the day after the election, but of course we didn't know what the election result in 2016 would be. And I remember being in Philadelphia, and it was midnight, and the album came out right at midnight. And I remember I was in the parking lot of a Popeyes, and I was listening to the album while scrolling through the West Coast election returns, and just a really, anyway, Busta's Lament is my favorite Tribe Called Quest song. I love Phife Dawg, and that song is a song that's only him. It's a solo Phife Dawg song. And it's this really bright moment on an album that is really, the Love Movement is a really bleak album. It was an album that came out after they had already announced they were breaking up. Um, it was just sad. I think for a lot of us who grew up with a Tribe Called Quest, them breaking up was very sad. Like, I still remember the Source magazine cover that announced their breakup, and that was for me the first time. Now, I've been a music fan for a long time, so now I'm used to bands I love breaking up. It just happens. But that was like the first time that it happened in my life in a substantial way. And I remember I was like 11, 12. I was devastated. It was like a divorce in my mind, you know? And it didn't help that my mom had died a year earlier. And so it was this first real big spiral for me where I was like, everything I love is just really going away, And it also happened at a time when rap music was feeling a lot of tension because Tupac and Biggie had been murdered in back-to-back, like 10-month stretch. And so I thought everything was just falling apart around me. But Busta's Lament is a song that is really sweet and really tender. And I think about that song. That's the one for me. Yeah.
Cool, thank you. With you writing about your favorite albums every year, They're curious to know how you came up with the idea to track the music that you listen to and rank your albums, as well as how listening to music that way affects you.
Um, to be honest, this was the first year I did hard tracking in a way that made sense. Most of the other years, unfortunately, it was just straight up vibes. Where like at the end of the year, I'd be like, this is the number of albums that are going to be. This year was the first year I tracked actual um, listening hours because I wanted to break down how many hours I was spending listening to music. And it's a lot, but it's actually not that many if you break it down week by week. And I was interested in this because I'm becoming I've grown a newfound interest in how I spend my hours, not to shame myself or to even encourage myself. I'm very happy with the bullshit ways I spend my time because I do think I counterbalance them with ways that are less bullshit. And even if I didn't, I would feel fine. But I'm also kind of interested in just the mechanics of that. And so this was the first year I was kind of like, how many hours am I listening to music? Like, what is the total number of hours, and what does that mean for me? And in terms of that list at the end of the year, my top albums list, for those who don't know, it's usually like an arbitrary number, 65 or 72. This year was 108. And the reason it was 108 this year was because I took the hours the hours I was listening to music, and particularly the number of tracks I was listening to, and I came up with a percentage. I came up with 8% of that, and I said 8% is going to be my top percentile. And how many albums fit into that 8%? And the math was 108. But I don't ever think about that while I'm listening. Like, it's not like I'm listening and being like, okay, I'm tracking another hour. It's easy to track because I have a like master Spotify playlist that has all the music from 2023. And then I have like a Bandcamp playlist of all the music that I pull from there. And those are the hours. It just like tells you the hours. So it's not like I was like, I didn't have like a fucking abacus or whatever. I just looked at what was on my phone and then use the calculator. And I'm bad at math, so I used the calculator and then asked a friend to double check my math. That was it. So it's not something I really think about a whole lot. But and you know what it is I'm dating myself a lot here. First by being like, I was in college when the Iraq War happened, but also I was 9 or 8 the first time I heard "Smells Like Teen Spirit" by Nirvana. And I remember being like, what the fuck is happening? Like, this is, and I was even more than that. I remember being like 10 or 11 when I first heard the song Call the Doctor by Slater-Kinney. And that was another moment where I was like, I didn't know music could do this. Like, I didn't know music could make me feel this way. And I think the thing that happens with us as we get older is we stop chasing that feeling. And that's why so many people my age or older, I hear them be like, well, there's no new music. It's like, there's no good new music. It's like, no, 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 you've just given up on the pursuit for whatever reason. There are a lot of reasons. Like, a lot of my friends have kids now, so that means they're listening to like the Bluey soundtrack, which I get. And also the Bluey soundtrack is not bad, if I'm being real. As someone who like recently watched a friend's kid and they were like, I want to play Bluey. And I was like, I guess, all right. And then 10 minutes in, I was like, hey, honestly, this shit is all right. You know what I mean? But I am in pursuit of the feeling. I'm in pursuit of, I don't want to surrender to this stagnant idea that nothing new can move me the way that anything before it moved me. And so I'm constantly seeking that. And I'll listen to as much as it takes to get that feeling multiple times a year. I don't really care how many hours it takes. That feeling is irreplaceable for me, and I want to find it.
My niece is 7 and she's very into Kids Bop, and I can confirm that that shit is actually bad. It is not just okay, it's bad. Today, as a critic, how do you separate yourself from fan and critic? And do you think harshness belongs in critiquing art?
Harshness, no. I struggle when I see critics who certainly have an axe to grind and are pursuing it to the ends of the earth. And I sometimes I tend to recuse myself from a piece, a review, or a profile if I feel that internally there's something motivating me beyond curiosity. And that goes both ways. If I'm too big of a fan, then my curiosity is clouded by fandom. And if I have a level of resentment for something that someone makes, my curiosity is clouded by that resentment. And that doesn't really serve anyone. I mentioned Slater-Kinney, a band I adore. I recently had a profile of them come out for the New Yorker. And I really was torn on going to write that profile, like really torn. Because I was like, I love this. I've loved this band for 3 decades now. Do I have anything interesting that I can pursue with them that is not just rampant fandom? And I at the end of the day, I decided to do it because I was like, I'm going to approach them and we're going to talk about grief. Grief is going to be the thing that bridges us together. But these are hard decisions that I'm making because I want to build a body of work that feels honest. And I don't want to build a body of work that just feels incendiary. And I sometimes feel like the critic, the pop culture critic now, is relying on this kind of incendiary approach, the thing because you have to get attention. But I'm not that worried. There's a level of privilege for me to say this, but I'm not that worried about attention. I've got enough, I suppose. I'm more worried about doing good work, effective work, and I think that requires an honest analysis of what I'm interested in and how I can get to it.
I want to dig into some of your critiquing and whether or not you receive backlash for that. But first, if you could rank your top 3 musical profiles that have been like real wow moments that you're proud of, what are your top 3?
Oh, they're not like huge names, weirdly. I mean, I wrote a profile on the musician Gillian Welch and David Rawlings. I wrote a profile on them that came out the day of the 2020 election. Was a weird choice because we worked on it all through the summer of 2020. That's probably first. I wrote a profile on the band Meet Me at the Altar. This is like young. Does anyone know this band? Young pop punk band of Black kids, which is like a band that I would have loved when I was young. Would have loved if that band existed when I was young. And I got to go down to Florida and write a profile on them, which was just it was like looking into a past version of myself. And then I'd say the Slater-Kinney thing that just came out. I was really proud of that. Yeah.
Awesome. I'm proud of it for you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Now that you've grown in notoriety and you use your social media presence a lot to share opinions, do you receive backlash? How do you handle that? Have you always handled it well?
Not a ton. I mean, I don't get a ton of backlash. You know, I wrote a thoughtful review of the last Nicki Minaj album, thoughtful but kind of negative. And I was just like bracing myself for backlash, and I didn't get much. Ed Sheeran's fans hate me, and they have for a long time. And I actually don't remember what the source of it. I'm not a big Ed Sheeran fan, but I'm also not. I think I like made a joke back when I worked at NTV News. I think I wrote a piece that I made a joke about Ed Sheeran that and his fans have never let me live it down. Even to the point, one time, there's like a handful of them who really specifically hate me. And one time I was like complimentary of I'm not very familiar, honestly, like I'm not that familiar with the Ed Sheeran oeuvre. But there was the song that I liked it. It was a tune. I was like, I like this tune. Bad Habits, is that an Ed Sheeran song?
Mhm.
Yes. Okay. I was like, I like this tune, and I was like, I'm gonna be public about how much I like this tune because I know that we have a tricky relationship, his fans and I. And I was publicly like, I like this tune. Here's what I like about this song. Here's what I like what it's doing. And one of his fans who you know has been in touch sent me a message that just said, "You motherfucker." And I was like, I like the song, you know. So I cherish that relationship. But most of the time, I don't get a lot of backlash. I think it's because I really do try to approach things thoughtfully. And I try not to talk in absolutes. I try really hard to not talk in absolutes. And I try really hard to not be prescriptive. I try really hard to say, this is perhaps how I felt, this might not be how you feel, or this is the way I did this thing, it might not be how you do this thing, and take from this what you will. I think that maybe invites people in a bit more than this idea of someone who is critical of pop culture or the country or whatever saying, you should feel bad because you didn't do this the way I did it, or you have to do this the way I did it, or I don't like this, and if you like it, then that says something about, you know, I'm just not, that's just not the way my brain works. And so maybe that's why I don't get as much backlash because I'm just I think I'm definitive in my opinions, to be clear, very definitive in my own opinions, but not so definitive that I need them to be your opinions.
Yeah, that's fair. I feel like, especially as the culture shifts now, it's been very like heated. Like the people that really have fierce opinions on things are very vocal about it.
Yeah.
And if you're landing in a place that you can share so publicly about very social justice driven issues and your biggest backlash is coming from Ed Sheeran, you're probably doing all
I'm
right.
doing okay. I mean, I have very strong convictions, and I think I'm very disciplined about my convictions, but I'm also just not wholly invested in making my convictions anyone else's, because that's just not how the work. I've organized in enough ways for in enough modes for a long enough time to know that like it is exhausting to spend a lot of time trying to convince people to join you in the fight when you already have people in the fight with you. I already got people there. I already got people who are, and so like I'm sharing what I'm sharing in hopes that maybe it ignites something in folks, but I'm actually not demanding anyone join me in the fight because I'm good there.
I want to go backwards a little bit, back to childhood again for
Yeah.
you, as you were talking a little bit about your neighborhood, but your family and things too. What can you recall as your earliest recollection of happiness?
My mom singing Whitney Houston in the kitchen while cooking. I remember that really vividly. I remember that being a very joyful thing for me. Mother had a very, um, my mother was not like a singer, but she had a very musical voice. And so I remember that as a kid so much.
I love that. Thanks for sharing. When you think about the people that raised you and your mother or whatever that dynamic looked like for you, what did the people who raised you teach you about love?
Um, Kind of what we were talking about before, that just because it goes away in a concrete form doesn't mean that its impact on you doesn't still get to define everything that comes after. I mean, I dealt with loss a lot at a pretty young age, I think. My mother died when I was 12 going on 13. And, you know, when you're that young, I think that level of absence, I don't know if anyone here has lost a parent at a young age or someone you love at a young age, a grandparent or a mentor, a friend, but all you really understand is absence. And it's not really, I think, of course it is grieve the way you grieve. You have to grieve the way you grieve. Um, but absence is not the only thing. It's like a long arc. And the thing that happens in that arc is you learn to, grief is really just kind of like the heart knocking at the door of memory repeatedly. And I think we owe it to ourselves to keep opening that door and seeing what's there. So I think they taught me that.
I love that, the heart knocking at the door of memory repeatedly.
Yeah.
I like it a lot. What has become more important to you recently than ever before?
So, I mean, a trivial answer is sleep. Sleep has become more important to me than ever before. I try to sleep 7 hours a night now. Also, I'm a big, I don't know, I'm a big Columbus Crew fan, like massive Columbus Crew fan. I don't know if everyone else is a fan. But when they won the championship, I was just telling this story earlier. The night they won the championship, I got invited to an after party. And we're all friends here, so I'm gonna be real. Wait, this is gonna be recorded, but not like distributed to the world, right?
Sure, I can edit this part out for you.
I'm gonna be real. I was like, it was a situation, candidly, it was a situation where I normally would not have gone. The person who invited me was very pretty. So I was like, I'm gonna rally, and and so I went home. I was like, I'm gonna change clothes and I'm gonna go home. I'm gonna change clothes and I'm gonna come back out. Herein lies the problem. Is like for me going home, and I was on the phone with my friend, and I was like, damn, I told this woman I'm gonna come out to this after party, but I'm about to go into my house. And like getting back out of the house is gonna be the problem. And so I had to make up this whole plan where I was like, don't sit on any couch. Like change your clothes, but like don't sit down. Literally putting on my shoes. In my sneaker room, I have a little couch. And I was like, I'm not sitting on the couch. I'm just gonna like stand up and put on my shoes. Because I had to make up a whole ass plan to be like, it's 10 p.m. and I have to leave my house again. And then when I left my house again, it was like, all right, I'm committed to being out. When I was young, I was a kid on the punk scene, and I would go to multiple shows a week. And my dear pal Tyler, who's another friend I lost who I love deeply, he had this rule where it was like, if you're awake and you're out past 4 a.m., then you're out until the morning. Like it's in for a penny and for a pound thing, and 4 o'clock is the number. I still live by that rule. And so I was out at like 3:30, it was 3:35, and I looked at my phone and I was like, oh, you know what I mean? Like it's it's real time to do the math on this. And I chose to go home and go to sleep. But the other thing is my body and brain wake me up at the same time every day, no matter what. So it doesn't matter that I went to sleep at like 3:50 in the morning. I was waking up at 7:30 no matter what. And so what I'm saying is sleep is important to me because it took me like 3 days to recover from that. I don't drink. Like I don't, I'm not I've never drank in my life. I don't drink or do what but I felt hungover for 3 days. So sleep is the most important thing to me now. But also I think on a more less or on a less clear communication, I think communicating is um it's sometimes it's hard for me to feel understood because I think people read my work or see something online and get, I'm at a point, I think, perhaps where there's like a funhouse mirror version of me that people understand is actually not the real version of me. And so I'm often trying to communicate my way to a type of clarity and understanding and affording people the opportunity to know how to love me well. And I think that's important. That and sleep.
It's quite the shift from like a depth to, I hope she was worth you feeling hungover for 3 days.
Is anyone worth that?
No, the answer is no. I know you're a Crew fan, but you also are a massive basketball fan.
Yeah, yeah.
And you've written and talked about the peculiar thing that is sports fandom. Ohio, as you know, is home to some passionate fan bases, whether it be in Columbus, Cleveland, or Cincinnati. What is it about sports fandom and our relationship with sports team that interests you?
Well, there's only one championship, right? And only one team can win it. And yet, every year, people, myself included, and you all, if you're Ohio State football fans, are spoiled perhaps in this, well, less so now. But when I was coming up, like the Tressel era, and I didn't go to Ohio State, but I was in the orbit of Ohio State. What I'm mostly saying is, some of my dearest friends are Browns fans, like dearest friends for decades, and I've watched them every single year just convince themselves towards a reality that is not reality. But that is it. That's exciting to me. I do it. I'm a basketball fan, I'm a Minnesota Timberwolves fan, and they have been fucking awful for 20 years of my life. This year they're very good, which is incredible for me. But they've been awful for, like, there was a season they won 16 games out of 82. And sure enough, the day before that season started, I was like, this is our year. But that's the cool thing about sports fandom is it's this low stakes delusion that is almost romantic, that I would not want that delusion projected onto any other part of my life, my actual like serious life. Other than perhaps there's a part of creativity for me that requires a level of delusion. But sports fandom, my barber is a Browns fan, and he was like, I just saw him recently. He was like talking about the playoff loss. He was like, up until like the last couple minutes of the game, I thought they could do it. And I was like, man, do we watch the same game? Like I granted I wasn't watching the full game. I was like in and out, dipping in and out. I was like, I'm pretty sure that shit was over before that, brother. You know what I mean? Like, but I love that. I love this idea that any moment you have to prepare yourself for the reality that any moment can be your moment. This year with the Crew, I know one of my least favorite sports cliches is when an athlete or a team is like, no one believed. I remember when the Lakers won a title in 2020 and LeBron was like, no one believed in me. It's like, you're motherfucking LeBron James. You played for the Los Angeles Lakers. You know what I mean? Like, cut the shit. But that said, hypocritically, this season with the Crew, for real, no one believed in that team except the people in that stadium. You know what I mean? Like, that playoff run is going to go down as one of the most miraculous playoff runs in MLS history, and no one believed it was possible until it was happening. There's a level of delusion that exists for you to prepare yourself for those moments where the dream comes true. That's what sports fandom is. It's not that you are certain that you're going to win something. It's that you're preparing yourself mentally and emotionally for this dream that you might not be able to access until you can. That's the whole thing.
I am historically not a sports knowledge knower, but I do know enough to know that there is a lot of things that are synonymous with blind faith, which you mentioned, which leads me into my next question of what is your relationship with religion? Growing up Muslim, do you still practice? Has it had any impact on you? What's your experience with it?
Yeah, I mean, of course, it has an impact on me. I will say that. Islam is a religion of like really intense discipline, the same way that perhaps Catholicism is in some ways, the same way that Judaism is in some ways. I think there's these disciplines sometimes my friend, the novelist Ben Perkert, who wrote a beautiful book called The Men Can't Be Saved, was raised Jewish. And there was a point where he and I were talking about our processes, creative processes. And I was like, oh, this is maybe like, we grew up in faiths that had a type of discipline that allowed us, we're mirroring each other in a way. Because it's like, you pray 5 times a day. Ramadan is a very disciplined practice. So I think there's a way that Islam play. The thing about me is I'm very lazy, but I'm intensely disciplined. And that overwrites my laziness. I would rather do nothing, but if I'm going to do something, that it is going to be motivated solely by my desire to follow a routine at all costs. That comes from being raised in a Muslim household where everything was routine. My ear, too. I'm trained towards a kind of musicality. Was anyone here raised Muslim, born Muslim? So the first thing, you hear the call to prayer, which is a very musical thing. In terms of my relationship with it now, I don't know. I'm very lapsed in a lot of ways. I still do Ramadan because I think there's a real discipline that I'm seeking that I can't find anywhere else, and a real recentering that I'm seeking. Ramadan's not just about fasting. It's not about just like no food or drink. It's also kind of about clearing the mind of improperties and impurities. And that allows me to be more gentle, more tender with the world. It allows me to reassess my relationship with rage and with cruelty and anger, which I think I'm doing all year round. But in Ramadan, it really crystallizes it. So I pursue that really rigorously. I take Ramadan really seriously. Now, would my imam at the Islamic Center that I grew up at, would he like to see me more? Of course, as evidenced by the fact that, I get a text from him every 2 months, reminding me that I live, like quarter mile away. But there's something about the language of literal language. I learned Arabic before I learned English. I learned to write Arabic before I learned to write English. There's something about the literal language of Islam and Arabic that is intriguing to me. Inshallah, even to say, you will receive this or this will happen for you if Allah wills it, is a really kind of beautiful and bleak sentiment. For example, if I'm getting on a flight, no, literally, actually, my niece is one of the top basketball players in Indiana. I'm very proud of her, and I'm going to go see her play tomorrow night. I'm driving to Indianapolis to see her play, and I texted my brother earlier this week and was kind of like, I'm gonna be there. I'm gonna be there at 8 or 7 or whatever. And he said, okay, we'll see you. I'll see you, inshallah. And essentially, that just means you'll make it to Indiana if Allah wills it, and if not, And that's really kind of bleak, but also kind of beautiful. So there's an eternal hopefulness in that language that appeals to me. But in terms of practicing, I think my relationship with religion is challenging, perhaps tethered to my relationship with the afterlife, which I have to believe exists, because if it does not exist, that means that I will never again see the vast amount of people I loved and have lost. It's like almost, in order to maneuver the world, in order to move through the world, I'm required to believe that an afterlife exists. But I'm also frustrated with the reality that if an afterlife exists and we are meant to believe that we have to earn our way into it, that doesn't, I don't know. I don't operate in a way that, and to suggest that an afterlife exists that we have to earn our way into means that there is an afterlife that we earn our way into that is evil. It's hard for me. But I would like to believe that there's a place where my mother is. I would like to believe there's a place where my friends are. I would like to believe that they are free of pain and waiting for me to arrive. So I guess that requires some faith.
I think the idea of earning your way into a thing removes the idea of grace and forgiveness
Absolutely.
from it. That
Absolutely.
I personally inherently, and my spirituality does not allow me to believe that exists that way. Yeah.
Also, hell for Muslims is like the bad kind of hell. Like it's like hell. I know that hell in all holy books is kind of bad, but like in the Quran, like hell is like pretty rough time. It's like your skin gets burned off, and then you get new skin, and then it gets burned off again. It's like, oh, I mean, for me, I would like if I am like, let's entertain the idea that hell is real. Let's entertain the sign on I-70 South or I-71 South. I would like just a really moderate, like a punishment that is not necessarily painful, but kind of annoying. you know, like just make me listen to, say, the Bee Gees catalog repeatedly. Sorry if there's anyone who's like really into Mamma Mia. Mamma Mia is cool, you know what I mean? But you know, just have me watch like all the seasons of The Sopranos, even the bad ones. Like I want hell to be like a little uncomfortable, but not necessarily painful.
You just described something that goes against every biblical sense.
Yeah,
But
I think hell is supposed to be painful.
yeah, you're like, can we tone it down a little?
I feel like I'd be the guy who gets to hell and tries to like negotiate.
I have absolutely no smooth pivot into this, so we're just going to make a hard turn, which is we have to talk about your writing a little bit.
Sure.
What's one of your favorite lines that you've written?
I don't think about them. I don't think I don't think about my writing in that way, I think. I was actually, because the book's coming out, I just did an interview about the book. The interviewer was like, "You wrote this and this and this." It's actually funny when you mentioned some. I don't know if anyone saw my face when Sadie was like, "Oh, the Summer of the Tribe Called Quest." When you were naming that, I was like, "What the fuck is that?" You know, so much of my writing, when it's gone, it's kind of gone. It operates in this way where I kind of feel. So yeah, I don't know. I don't think, and I definitely don't think about my writing in the. Sorry, my phone is ringing. Um, Hope everyone's okay. It's so funny because my phone rings now either only for very good news or very bad news. Like I feel like so many of us text, and I'm someone who will call my friends just to be like, you know what I mean? I want to hear your voice and I love you and whatever. And that happens sometimes, but like 80% of the time, it's either like really good news or really bad news. And so now I'm just like, well, either someone's getting married, someone's having a kid, maybe someone's dead. You know what I mean? We'll roll the dice. But I don't know. I don't. Inshallah, everyone's fine.
Do you want to take a second and text them,
No, absolutely no. But yeah, I never think about my lines, individual lines in that way. I think full things I'm proud of, but not individual lines. The lines are just like a part of the machine, and the machine's more important.
What do you think the hardest part of what you do for a living is?
Um, I know what I'm capable of, and I know, and that's hard because on the other side of that is what I dream myself capable of being, and you don't always get there. And that's just the reality of it. And like you can build the plane as many times as it takes, and sometimes it just doesn't, it just crashes repeatedly, and that's just it. And there's no way, and you have to learn when you're not ready to do the thing that you dreamed yourself doing.
One of the fellows asked, what is the intended influence of There's Always This Year, which is the book that's coming out in March? Yeah.
Yeah, March.
Yeah,
26th.
March, on young adults, and how do you believe this was achieved through your writing?
I mean, you know, it's truly and honestly a book about mortality. And I think it's going to get, people are going to call it a basketball book or call it a book about Ohio or call it a book about, but it's really a book about coming to terms with the fact that that we don't have infinite time. And so the question then becomes, I know this is echoing something I talked about, what do we make of it? I think that has an impact on, I think when I was young, I distinctly did not want to live forever. Actually, when I was young, thinking that I would, the arrogance of youth that made me feel like I could live forever made me not want to. And as I've aged, thankfully, I've become a bit obsessed with time because while I certainly still don't want to live forever, I do want to kind of slow down the clock a bit. And I would encourage, it's so hard at y'all's age or any age, I think, but particularly when you're young and things are moving fast and like there's pleasure in every direction, perhaps, it's hard to even think about slowing down a day or an hour, but you're required to. Like I'm saying that to y'all, like for real, you're required to, because it's it's over for someone, you know what I mean? Like it's over for someone. One of my, I don't know, we don't have to get into like death and mortality, but it's over for someone before it should be. However we want to define should. It's over for someone before it should be. And I grew up around a lot of young folks who died at a very young age for any number of reasons. And so it's a requirement to say, what is worthwhile about the time I have with the people I love, or just myself? Which is why I can say, it's Sunday and I'm going to watch every episode of Gilmore Girls season 3 because it is a comfort and a familiar thing to me that slows down this day, which in that moment only meant I don't want Monday to come because I have a lot of shit I didn't do last week that I have to do. But that is it too, right? Everything is over before you know it. I don't mean to be morbid. I don't mean to be bleak. Everything is over before you know it. And you have some control over your own relationship to memory, but you also have control over your relationship to the present. And I think and hope the book does that. It really imbues people with a kind of autonomy to take control over the present. Not that it's it's certainly not a self-help book. Truly not at all. But I do think that is a takeaway.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can certainly take that it's over before it should be as a bleak sentiment, right? But there's also a version of this, depending on your hopefulness and your faith in things, of you have the ability to make the best of what you can, right? And when you can acknowledge your interaction with being present and what that looks like for you, then you can intentionally slow down time. And especially at like this age, that's such a cool thing to be able to harness.
Yeah.
We made it through the long form ones.
Cool.
Just to be mindful of time. I want to leave room so that we can ask a few audience questions, but first we've got a rapid fire if you're down.
For sure.
Cool.
Of course.
I've got 22 questions here. I have 22 in 2 minutes, certainly not 20 minutes, but although you could if you want. I bet we could do it in shorter than that. So we're just going to go with like first thing that comes into your brain, first sentence words, things like that.
Okay.
Can somebody pull a stopwatch or like their
Wow.
Matt, you're on it.
Matt was on it.
It's because he's amped up on that milkshake still.
That milkshake, I'm gonna be real with you, brother. That milkshake looked fucking wild.
Absolutely not something that's diabetes.
Yeah, like I saw that and I was like, you're brave.
Okay, are you ready? Are you ready?
Yeah.
Cool. Go ahead. All right. Go-to ice cream flavor.
Chocolate chip cookie dough.
Describe There's Always This Year in one word or phrase.
Mortality.
Childhood crush.
Tatiana Ali, I have a story about that.
Most worn item in your closet.
Jordan 4, white cement Jordan 4.
What's your walkout song?
In the Air Tonight.
Greatest basketball player of this generation.
This generation, I mean LeBron James.
Favorite sneaker style.
Jordan 4.
Most underrated artist currently.
Cleo Sol.
Go-to comfort show.
Go-to comfort show?
Yeah.
Gilmore Girls for now.
Song guaranteed to make you cry.
Can't help falling in love with you.
Song
also a story about that.
Song guaranteed to make you laugh. Not laugh, sorry, dance.
Song guaranteed to make me dance.
Yeah.
I Dance Somebody by Whitney Houston.
Favorite place you visited.
Portland, Maine.
Character you think you'd play in a movie.
Character I would play in a movie?
Yeah.
Beast, the X-Men Beast.
Describe your dog Wendy in one word.
Cerebral.
Favorite thing to bake.
Plain, just straight up chocolate chip cookie.
Biggest pet peeve.
I don't have any.
What
No
a
pet peeve.
accommodating line of bullshit. One thing you wish you did more.
Be one with nature, genuinely.
One thing you wish you did less.
Agonize over minutia.
Best concert you've been to.
In history? Fuck. I've been to like a million. I don't know. I saw the Black Keys play in a rubber factory in Akron in 2003, and that was cool.
What's a line you wish you'd written?
That's time, but let's.
We're gonna finish the last three, Matt. Thank you.
Line I wish I'd written. I wish I'd written everything that Mary Oliver's ever written.
Just the whole collection.
The whole collection.
Okay, that's a cop out. If you were in a band, what would your band name be?
I was once in a band, and we were named Citywide Fog Machine.
Can we find this somewhere?
Oh,
Okay. All right, last one. I know you're a French fry connoisseur. Who has the best French fries?
I like a steak fry, but I also like a crinkle fry. I like the Shake Shack fries. There's a lot of like density to them.
All
Yeah.
right.
Can I say a thing about Tatiana Ali?
Yeah, I'd love it if you did.
So Tatiana Ali, who, for those that might be dating myself again, do people know who she is? She played Ashley on The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. And when I was a kid, I had a massive crush on her, like massive crush on her. As an adult, I was working on A Little Devil in America, and I was like researching, and I got this book about Black dance and Black performance through the lens of like post-slavery. It was like about minstrelsy, and it was written by a guy named Dr. Vaughn Raspberry. And I was like, man, I love this guy's analysis. I love his work. I love everything about him. Simultaneously, I was at a, this is a stupid thing to say out loud. I was at a point in my career in life where I was like, am I famous enough to date Tatiana Ali? Like, could I ostensibly like DM Tatiana Ali and maybe she'll respond? But I love this dude's work. And I was like, I'm gonna Google this Vaughn Raspberry character. And I did. That motherfucker's married to Tatiana Ali. So it turns out she loves writers who write about Black performance. And I was like, so I really, really like sliding doors moment, except not really, but I could, like, how, speaking of delusional, I was like, damn, that could have been me. Could not have been me. So yes, Tatiana Ali.
Moral of the story.
Moral of the story.
Shoot your shot or me.
The moral of the story is don't shoot your shot. There's one thing I want to, here's the thing. I'm sorry, I know we have to get the audience.
No, go for it.
The problem, and I say this to the fellas specifically, because I think that this is not to be like strictly gendered, but I do think that this falls upon us more often. The shot selection is poor for y'all. That's the problem. And I say this to someone, I err on the side of caution. Don't be out here just like saying whatever. Like I say this because I mentor young writers, and recently one of them was like, "Oh, I'm a DMer on Snaps or whatever," and I was like, "Okay, like I'm not gonna hinder. Let me see what you send." You know what I mean? Like we're here, we're talking about poems, we're talking about writing. Let me see what you send to this young woman. He showed me a screen. I was like, brother, delete everything. You know what I mean? I'm not telling you I'm not gonna work. Just so shot selection, be thoughtful about this, because you can't just be like, your first thought is probably not your best thought. If there's any wisdom you leave here with today. I say this as someone who in my 20s, like back in the days of MySpace and Facebook, was not smart about shot selection. So shoot your shot, but there's a difference between shooting, say, a wide open mid-range jump shot in a contested fadeaway three. To extend the sports metaphor. Who has questions from the audience?
If you have to go, I know we're 3 minutes over. Are you good to do some questions?
Yeah, as long as I am home before the Timberwolves game, which tonight is at 10 p.m. I will not be here until 10 p.m.
I also will not be here till 10 p.m. But if you do have to go, thank you so much for being here. Mike is going to manage questions from the audience with the microphone. I'll keep an eye on time just for the sake of everybody and the Timberwolves. But feel free to ask away, guys.
This is a silly question, but I feel like I have to say this. So you mentioned like shooting your shot, right? But going back on the idea of like delusion, I feel like nowadays it's more drive. It's more like a heartbeat of like shooting that hook shot, eyes closed outside the stadium, rather than doing the wide open mid shot. Like, do you kind of understand? This is more of a statement, but like,
no, I feel that.
Do you understand like where the sentiment comes from?
I do. Listen, to have a crush is to invoke a type of delusion, and I think that is good. I think I have literally. This is the only time I will toot my own horn. I have maybe written the definitive modern contemporary essay on crushing. I have an essay called On Summer Crushing that I say it's definitive because I was told that, not because I actually think that. But so I understand the mechanics of having a crush and how crushes a healthy, happy, joyful delusion comes from them. In the midst of that delusion, however, one must, I think, be protective of their heart. Because delusion, romantic delusion, will send us to the edges of the cliffs, shouting out to whoever will listen, and that is perhaps good, but what echoes back might not be pleasing. And so if you can perhaps close the boundary between your delusion and your reality, then a then find a shot that is maybe a little bit difficult, but not the most difficult. You know, nothing wrong with a contested three, for example. Maybe just don't fade away on it. I believe fully in romantic delusion. I'm committed to it, actually, I think, more than most things. But slash and. My therapist is trying to make me say and instead of but because she thinks I'm a pessimist, which I guess the work does suggest that's true. But slash and, you know, close the gap between delusion and reality. And I think there's a place where romance flourishes. We got two. If people can, I can like probably hear, but then everyone can't hear. Yeah, the mic is a good idea. Good idea, Mike.
Accessibility and all.
Yeah.
Hi, my name's Marina. I was wondering if you believe in the love languages and what yours is.
I think I do. I would like to. I think that I would like to kind of engineer my own very specific love languages. So mine are like, perhaps, definitely not words of affirmation. I think that just doesn't vibe with anxiety. I've met people, I've mentioned earlier, I have like multiple anxiety disorders. And for me, at least the way mine shows up is like any attention or affirmation feels like a very bright light. And so definitely not words of affirmation, except for when I'm sad. So words of affirmation sometimes. I would like, I think that here's the thing with love languages. I think everyone, you know how when you were a kid, maybe you would go to like a soda machine and just put like 10 different kinds, you would just run down the thing and just put like 10 different, mix up the drinks or whatever. That's what I want to do with love languages, where it's like, I like a little bit of all of them, but on my own terms. Like physical touch, perhaps, within these hours. Or like, what's the other one? Gift giving?
Gift, acts of service.
Actually, you know what? I think acts of service is a big one for me. Like I'm really drawn to both engaging in acts of service, witnessing acts of service, being, I don't know, what's your love language? What's your main one?
Mine is
Well, okay, wait a minute. Can I ask a question of you?
Yeah.
Is a love language something that, this is how bad, I don't really understand how they work. Is this something that, so your words of affirmation, does that mean that you are someone who needs to receive them or give them?
love language is supposed to be both like how you prefer to receive and how you give.
Okay.
But I feel like it's different. So like
Definitely.
when I'm saying like my love language is words of affirmation, I'm saying that and that's how I prefer to receive.
Because words of affirmation guy, if it means I am giving words of affirmation. We talked about earlier, we talked about like sending fit pics to the group chat. I'm the guy, my friends will send me an outfit pic and I will have them like excited and ready to go. You know what I mean? I love giving words of affirmation. Don't really care about receiving them. But I think acts of service, maybe, I don't know. I do believe in them. I really believe, or at least I believe in the baseline, please, you know, one real requirement for me with people is, be it like platonic, romantic, whatever, is please tell me how to love you well. And if that means that we are looking at a chart of love languages, then I will do that. If that means we go to like, you know, if we go to like a crystal store and you like are walking me through the crystals and telling me that's how, you know, I'll do whatever it takes to love people well, because I think that is a real, you can't just love people immensely. You can't just love people at a volume that is loud. You have to love them well. And so, yeah, I mean, I think I believe in it ostensibly, but I would probably need to like just mix up a drink, a very specific drink of love languages.
You had a lot of thoughts on this, and I remember you were kind of like, okay, we can move on, but I'm actually really curious what they were. So when it comes to mortality,
Yeah.
I'm curious how you reconcile mortality with morality and purpose.
That's a good question. I mean, I don't really tie my relationship with mortality to morality because, again, I mean, as Sadie mentioned, like I struggle to think about an afterlife that requires we be a certain level of good. And I think if I were to live my life understanding or thinking that I had to be a certain type of good in order to achieve some eternal whatever, my motivations for goodness would be compromised, I think. And I think we actually genuinely see that with people of quote unquote faith, of all faiths, and their approaches how they genuinely like interact with other humans. The relationship to goodness is compromised because there's an ever-present carrot dangling above their heads that they can't quite reach yet, but might be able to reach if it becomes box checking. So I don't tie it to morality, but in terms of purpose, I mean, I don't really know what my purpose is other than I would like to live a life where the things I produced are not the most memorable things about me, particularly not here in this place I live. I'm born in Columbus, lived in Columbus almost my whole life. In this place, I would like it very much if my life was defined by something other than just the fact that I produced things that people like. That might be some of it, and I'm okay with that. But I hope that I live a purposeful and principled life. If that's what my purpose is, I guess I don't know, but I don't. This is maybe bleak. I don't know. I don't wake up every morning with like a sense of purpose, quote unquote, other than I'm going to try my best at the things that are in front of me, a couple hours at a time.
Can you talk a little bit about your inspiration in your writing and how I kind of have like a three-parter here. Inspiration in your writing, how to kind of formulate those ideas and how you organize them, and also when to know when to scrap it.
Well, I tend to think, so much of my motivation in writing is purely, I'm just a deeply curious person. And I like to get, I'm not writing to seek answers. I'm maybe writing to find a better way to articulate the core curiosities I have so that I can take that better articulation into the next curiosity. So that's kind of what forms the ideas and organizes them. I'm okay with, I'm very okay with failure on my own terms. I'm less okay with preventing myself from taking a big swing because of fear. I don't really, fear for me in the creative space is a luxury. It's a luxury to have. Sure, in our real actual lives, it's good to have a fight or flight response. It's good to say the bear is running towards me and I'm going to run away. Bears are very fast though, so you're not going to make it. But in my creative work, I need to believe that I can kill the bear. Doesn't matter if I can or can't. I need to believe that I can. I don't have the luxury of fear, because if I had fear, if I feared failure, then I wouldn't get to the thing that I need to do to get to the other thing. Half the books in my career, over half at this point, I've gotten halfway through them, thrown them out, and started again. Because the first time I tried, I was learning how to do the thing I needed to do. I was learning how to fly the plane, so to speak. And so I know when to scrap something when the process of working on it has taught me something greater. And I can go back and rebuild on that greater thing. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Sydney Vance, and my question is in regards to what you kind of gave as an answer for another question about wanting to be remembered outside of the things that you produce. As an author, and as a Black author at that, do you feel visible outside of your works? And if not, or if so, how do you prioritize separating your identity from the things that you produce?
I do feel visible outside my works, but it's easy for me, I think, to feel visible and varied, like a visible and varied human outside my works, because I have so many massive, intense interests that are just, I mean, I don't know, like if folks say follow me on Instagram, I think it's just it's a very visual thing where it's like, here's the thing I'm interested in this hour. It's not the same as the thing I was interested in last hour. Here's another thing I'm interested in this same hour that's maybe kind of similar, but also not. You know what I mean? But that's just the way my brain operates. And so I'm trying to, I think, in trying to honor all my excitements and obsessions, it's painting a portrait of a full human being who is not interested. I say this lovingly, there are a lot of Black writers who are interested in answering grand questions about the American experiment. And I'm not one of them, because I think I'm not speaking to the comforts of an audience who wants to know how to fix the country. Now, sure, my work can spark some unique conversations in many realms, but I'm not trying to cater to an audience who is looking for a Black writer to, really don't want to like, uh, I'm not, for me, I'm not trying to write like a how to be anti-racist type book, you know, and I'm not knocking Ibram Kendi or anyone. I'm just, um, because then you become the Black person that everyone looks to for answers. And that narrows your ability to be a full person because you are then the Black person who tells non-Black people how to fix the country, or how to fix the world, how to fix their neighborhood. And I'm just not that interested in that. Now, outside of my work, am I interested in building broad coalitions of folks to fight for something better than what we have in front of us? Absolutely. Then I'll match it for years, right? But in my actual work, my curiosities need to take center stage, and those curiosities are not going to act in service of people who are looking for me to be the Black person with answers. Not anymore. So I know that how to be anti-racist book means a lot of people. I'm not just Ibram Kendi, you know.
Let's do, you good with 2 to 3 more?
Yeah, yeah.
Cool.
Hi, I'm Jeff.
Hey, Jeff.
Love your take on the Jordan 4s, first of
Thank
all.
you.
One of the best Jordans. Kind of a follow-up to some combination of the last 2 answers. You kind of mentioned two answers ago, I think, like the idea of the big swing.
Yeah.
And you're interested in the big swing. You kind of then in the last answer define some things that you're not as interested in. So I guess my question is, what does the big swing look like to you? Like what defines that?
In my work, I think it's formal invention, inventing new kind of forms through which people are consuming language, if I can, be it shape of the book or the way the book, you know, for example, there's always this year is literally shaped like a basketball game. Instead of chapters, there are 4 quarters. And instead of section breaks, there's a countdown clock through which the sections are read. So formal inventiveness, but also pushing myself, you know, before every book I write, I ask myself, what am I afraid of? What have I been afraid of? And how can I get closer to that this time out? Every time out, I have to get a little bit closer to a fear, and render that fear a little less large, to make it a little less of a looming thing. And so I'm very interested in that. I think, and I think that's a very big defining thing. But also kind of playfulness. You know, I think another thing, and this I feel like this is also somewhat racialized. I think Black writers are sometimes seen as like super serious, hyper serious. But James Baldwin was very playful. Toni Morrison was extremely funny. Extremely funny. I think of myself as someone who mostly is kind of just like a goofy little fella, at least like a lot of the time. And I want that to show in my work too. So I'm trying to, you know, it's like all those things, like building a full portrait of a person who is kind of just silly and curious. That's I think my 2 defining traits. Can we do these 2? And then I want to get, you had a question from like way back that I want to get to.
Hi, I want to say thank you so much. I really have enjoyed hearing you speak. My name is Hanya.
Hey, Anya.
So my question was kind of, as you've been moving through, I guess, your intellectual journey and pursuing, writing, have you personally struggled with ego in a way in which it compromises, as you were saying, the goodness of your work and the sincerity of your work, whether that's writing or whether that's the service you pursue?
That's such a
And how do you address that?
Yeah, well, the way I quickly decouple myself from ego is by not being governed by decoration. You know, it's to have won awards and say you don't care about awards is maybe cliche. And so maybe it's not me saying I don't care about awards. I'm not motivated by them. The casual name for the MacArthur is the Genius Grant. And the year I won or the year it got announced, you're expected to kind of embrace this idea of this cohort of genius. But I work with so many young writers, and I'm from a place where genius is expansive, Black genius particularly. The kid in my old neighborhood who has 4 colors of chalk, and through that 4 colors of chalk has on the sidewalk made a landscape that is so rich and beautiful. That's a genius. That 8-year-old is a genius. That the high schooler I work with who wrote a book of poems and stapled them together on her own and brought them to me, that's a genius. The way I kind of remove myself from ego is saying that I'm operating in an ecosystem of genius that is enhancing my own work. I live in a city, the greatest artist who has ever lived in Columbus is Amina Robinson. For me, I think for most people, point blank period, the greatest artist who's ever lived in this city is Amina Robinson, and there's no one even close. And so to understand that, and I say this as a kid, I would go to Amina Robinson's house and watch her work. Her house, which is now owned by the art museum, so you can go and see it. I'd watch her work. I would sit in her writing room and watch her work. And I am someone who I'm lucky enough to be in a lineage of an artist like that. And so that means that I am both wholly unique and not unique at all. In the ego, there's no room for ego when you witness brilliance at a young age, from your, not only from the city you're from, but Amina is an East Side artist, from the neighborhood you're from. It's important to say that, I don't know, sorry, I get very emotional thinking about Amina. I am lucky enough to have been witness to and remain witness to acts of genius in every corner of this city that I live in and love, and therefore I don't need to claim any of it for myself. And there's no way to decouple ourselves from the ego than that.
I don't know. I had a couple of like pretty silly questions.
Love a silly question.
Okay. The first one is, I think you said "I Can't Help Falling in Love" is a song that makes you cry.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if it was tied to the Columbus Crew experience at all.
It's literally only tied to the Columbus Crew, which is funny. Which is funny because that on its own is a beautiful song. Like the line, gosh, like "Take my hand, take my whole life too." What a beautiful line. But I don't really love Elvis, but I love almost every version of it that exists that is a non-Elvis version. Casey Musgraves has a version of it that is just like heart-wrenching. But it's stupidly, it's only tied to Wise Men Say, like the Columbus Crew thing. And I was at a wedding with a friend. I'm a great friend date to a wedding. I'm sure any date, but I'm a great friend date to a wedding because parents like me and I look fine or whatever, and I can dance or whatever. But we were at the dinner, and there was a dessert portion, and the band started playing "Can't Help Falling in Love," and I was like sobbing. And my friend looked at me, she's like, "Pull it together. Like, why are you crying? Like, I didn't even know the people getting married." My friend hit me up and was like, "Just come to this with me because I need a body. Like, my parents will freak the fuck out if I don't have a body at this wedding." I didn't even know the people getting married. And I'm like sobbing at the table. My friend's like hitting me, like, "Get it together." And it's just like, why are you crying? Like, I don't know. And I was like, I know I'm a deeply feeling person, but I promise you, unfortunately, I'm crying for the stupidest possible reason. This is all about sports. But yeah, my relationship to that song is entirely tied to the Crew. I cry on command whenever I hear that song.
My second question is, well, I'm in like my 4th rewatch of Gilmore Girls, so I feel like I have to ask you what team you're on.
Hey, tell me what team you're on first. Actually, I would love to hear that from it. Don't tell. I would not know.
I feel like normally I'm Team Jess, but like right now I'm in a really rough time in the rewatch right now to say Team Jess. So I have like a temporary moratorium on Jess right now. So I would say, okay, well, I'll keep it quick, but I feel like season 7, like I feel like you can remove season 7 from the record because like the original people weren't involved. So it's just not how it was supposed to be. So I would say Team Marty because I feel like he could have had a much better ending and they really threw him under the bus at the end.
I'm Team Marty, and I will say this, to be Team Jess for me requires a level of emotional rigor that I'm actually not interested in, because it takes so much work to not only, it doesn't take a lot of work, I think, to start, or perhaps like the inception of being Team Jess is not the labor. To remain Team Jess through the entire arc, not for me. But I will say, as I've gotten older and my relationship with the Gilmore Girls has grown, I do feel more sympathetic to the Team Jess folks. So I have a lot of sympathy for you. Not in like a patronizing way. What's your favorite season?
I don't know. It's kind of basic, probably season 1.
One is, I mean, yeah, it's a classic. I think for me, it's like 1, 3, 5. The odds are really nice for me, except 7. I mean, 7
That's
doesn't, it's
interesting.
7's not like a real,
7 sucks.
yeah.
Don't watch 7 if you haven't watched it yet.
Yeah, stick to the odds except 7.
And just stay away from Jess, like holistically, I think. I realize you're in a team Jess spot, but it's tough. Like, I feel like as you
Brutal.
get older, like you also realize things about characters and shows.
Yep,
Like,
that's it.
I don't know if you're a Grey's Anatomy fan at all. Okay, thank you. Great, wonderful. I'm a massive one. But like, look, are you a Grey's Anatomy at all?
No, is that show still, it was on for like 50
It's
seasons.
still, it is actually now the longest running medical show in the history of ever. And I've derailed this now, but I think this is a hill I will die on, which is watching Grey's Anatomy back and realizing that McDreamy is actually kind of shit is horrifying. But I loved him. And I feel like as I have like grown as a human, it's bad. And like now that I'm in therapy, I'm like, oh, that was tough. Like, what was it there? It's bad. He like manipulates her and she drops all of her like accolades and things that she's
He manipulates Meredith?
Yeah, not Meredith. Yes.
That's all I know about Grey's Anatomy is that there's a woman named Meredith.
That's your one knowledge.
Well, yeah, I dated someone who was like very into it and she was like, Mary, you won't believe what Meredith did. And I would be seated, you know, I'd be like, tell me what Meredith did. You know what I mean? Like, I love gossip, even if it's, you know, TV gossip. Can we do the one more question? Because you've had a question, I feel like you had a question like a long time ago. And sorry to put you on the spot, but you had a question like we were like posted up there. And I've been so eager to hear it.
All right, so actually you made this question a lot more interesting ever since we started, because from the start, I've been very curious about the way you think of life is so finite. I'm curious as to what you view as infinite. And if you view your words and what you say as infinite, what is something that you'd want to stay after you die?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I mean, I really think about building my life as a writer revolves around, I think, I don't know about infinite, but building a body of work that'll outlast me or outlive me. I only say I don't know about infinite. I mean, who's to say whenever I die and how much of the earth is, it was like 60 degrees on Christmas morning. So, you know, who's to say how much of the earth will be left? Sorry to bum you out, I guess. But yeah, I was taking a run on Christmas morning and I was like, this feels so great. I feel so wonderful. And then I was like, wait a minute.
You had the realization, like everything's burning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The vibes are off, maybe. The vibes are both on and off. It was very literally, it is so over, but we are so back at the same time. You know, like, there's this photo of, sorry, I'm derailing us. There's this photo I love of Kobe Bryant after the Lakers won in 2000 and I forget, where he's like holding he's like in the locker room. Has anyone seen this photo where he's like in the locker room holding the trophy and he looks like miserable? That is my ideal. It is so over, but simultaneously we are so back in photo form. But I do think, I hope my words are more permanent than I am. I hope that I leave behind something that people can return to. I have books in my home that are so old, like 1920s and shit like that, you know, like poets. I have like a Phyllis Wheatley book that was written in 1890 something, you know, and to even have to think that is possible for my own work is really overwhelming, but I think it's also necessary. Otherwise I would not do the work. So I want to leave behind everything that I put into the world will be more permanent than I am. But the problem with that, or the thing, not a problem, but the thing is, you outgrow your work. There are things in my second book that I wrote that I would not write today at all. And you have to make peace with that too. You got to make peace with the fact that all of you are going to have to do this, no matter if you are a creative person, but just as a living person. You're going to hit a point where you look back on something you wrote or lived or did or whatever, and you have to say, I wouldn't have done that now. I'm not ashamed. You have to like detach shame from that. You really have to detach shame from that shit for real. Because what actually you're saying is, this was a thing that helped me springboard to a level of growth that I would not have gotten. So there's that part of anxiety, the anxiety too, but I hope to leave behind something permanent. Yeah, I mean, I think I pursue my work because I'm trying to outpace the realities of my kind of finite presence. But also the life you live is a legacy that is permanent, as long as it I mentioned Amina Robinson earlier, and like people have been talking about Amina. People tell stories about Amina to kids who weren't even alive when she was alive. You know what I mean? Like I mentioned Amina's name because I hope that maybe a couple of you will go home and Google her, and then she is in your life. And that's also legacy. And yeah, you could look at her art or whatever, but also just saying this person's name was spoken into a room because they lived in such a way that was inspiring to someone else. That's also legacy. And so there are plenty of ways to define legacy that I'm trying to perhaps reach towards. The work is one thing, but also I hope that whenever I'm not here anymore, someone, I don't know, will sit in a room and say, I crossed paths with him once and he was pretty nice. You know, I ran into him once and he was a pretty nice guy. Or I read his work and I thought his work was really vulnerable and generous. And then I met him and he was kind of like that. That to me is also a type of permanence.
All right, that's it, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for being here and
Yeah.
spending your evening with us. Thank you, all of you, for spending your evening and extra time with us, for both of you. Please get home safe, whether that is driving or walking. I'm not sure if it was still snowing. It was supposed to, though. But I appreciate you guys braving the cold and
truly. Getting out of the house with this weather is like, congrats to you.
and ultimately, thank you for going beneath the surface with us.